Hello and welcome back to The Hatch. I'm Rosie Murphy.
And I'm Sammy Roth. This is the podcast where we talk about Lost.
This week we are going to discuss Season 1's episode Homecoming. Ethan returns. Claire, already returned at the end of the last episode. But the good news about Ethan's return is that we get to bring you the second half of our interview with William Mapother, the actor who played that wonderful and terrifying character.
It's an exciting thing. We talked to him about all of his many appearances on the show post-death, as we learn in this episode. Let's get to it.
Alrighty, as always, we start the show off with hot takes.
Rosie, what is your hot take?
I was going to explain what a hot take was, but I will jump right in and just say that this flashback is so painful to watch. I think it's one of the worst in terms of, the emotions that I feel when I watch it. This one's hard for me because it's Charlie wanting to do better and genuinely seeking to do better and then just failing of his own volition.
Yeah.
And it's just really painful to watch and hurting somebody in the process.
Yeah, it's tough because it is of his own volition, but it's also the drugs and the withdrawal, and he he puts himself in that situation, which is bad. But
he puts himself in the situation in terms of he decides to date this girl in order to get money or to steal something so that they can get money for more drugs, but then finds out he really likes her and wants to change his ways.
And when he takes the job, that's a good sign.
That's a sign that he wants to change his ways, but at the end he just can't fight it, which is really sad and also probably a poignant point about addiction and, how difficult it actually is to break out of the cycle of addiction.
Agreed.
It's poignant and it's hard, but I think it's a high quality flashback in terms of just, how the show's done.
I agree.
What's yours?
Okay, my hot take is about Jack, and it's about his decision of who to give the guns to.
Good one.
Well, so Locke's, I guess it's Locke and Jack. Locke says we have 4 guns, we should have 4 men. And it's like, okay, so immediately you're talking about men and you're excluding Kate from this conversation. And then later Jack goes up to Sawyer to give him one of them and chooses Sawyer over Kate. And then Kate shows up and is like,
can I
want
go?
In.
Yeah.
And Jack just, totally flimsy. Sorry, we only have 4 guns. I just gave one to the least trustworthy member of the group, so I guess I can't, give you one. When clearly Kate is way more qualified than anyone else in the survivors to handle this.
So, I love Kate and I agree with you. However, this could just be Jack protecting Kate, both in, a paternalistic and annoying way where he just doesn't want her to come, but also in kind of a protecting her secret way.
That could be. I think that's a generous reading for Jack, considering how he's acted anytime Kate has wanted to go near anything dangerous in the past.
Yeah, I think it's much more the former than the latter.
He feels like he has to protect her, and then
Sawyer shows up.
And Sawyer figures out a way to get Kate a gun and get her in on this.
Right, turns out Sawyer has had a secret gun this whole time.
And he's very sly with Jack. He's like, so how much ammunition do you have?
It's all 9mm, right?
Oh, yeah. Okay, well, great then. I guess you don't have an excuse for me not giving Kate this gun.
It is well done on Sawyer's part.
So this is an episode about Charlie.
Yeah.
And Charlie is one of your favorite characters.
He is.
So what do you think in this episode?
He is. So I've already made my point about the flashback, which I think is very hard. This show centers around what I think is one of Charlie's more annoying qualities, which is his desire to protect Claire. And at the end of the flashback, Lucy says to him,
"Why did you take the job, Charlie?"
"I wanted to be respectable. I wanted you to think that I could take care of you."
"You'll never take care of anyone."
You'll never take care of anyone, and that's supposed to be the thing that, that's supposed to be the underlying emotion in this whole episode, right? That's the thing he's trying to overcome.
Just kind of a weird for a theme for an episode.
Well, it's the same with Jack and You Don't Have What It Takes. Right. And, everybody sort of has this thing.
I guess I'm with you. It's an annoying quality of...
It just feels like really... I don't know, it makes me kind of uncomfortable to watch how aggressively Charlie tries to take care of Claire. He is equipped to take care of her in some ways, but he's really insistent about proving it, which I think is more about proving something to himself than it is about proving something to her.
I think you're right, and I think part of the issue is the thing we discussed a few episodes ago when Claire was getting attacked by Ethan, which is, she doesn't necessarily want to be protected. or to be sort of coddled
Right.
in the way. And,
Right.
and that was the whole issue where, when Jack, wanted to give her medication because he thought she was imagining things, and Charlie just wanted to follow her around everywhere. And
Right.
they were very clearly...
She objected to both.
Right.
Yeah.
And this episode, we see it again, where once she finds out what's really going on, she says,
I can talk for myself.
Claire, they want to use you as bait.
I don't remember Ethan. I don't remember what he did to me. But if I can help stop him from hurting anyone else, I have to do that.
Like, I was kind of proud of Claire in that
For sure.
moment. Like, she did the right thing, I think. She didn't want anyone else to get hurt. I agree.
can I bring up Jack and Locke?
You certainly may. I also have some thoughts about Jack and Locke.
Well, good. Well, my main thought about Jack and Locke, and perhaps this lines up with what you're thinking about, is I'm so fascinated to watch, like, their different leadership strategies.
And this, I think, is the first episode where we really see them in contrast to one another. It's the first one, I think, where they're side by side making the same decision.
Yeah.
And they have to argue with one another and negotiate, and yeah, it's fun to watch.
It is, and I actually kind of like Matthew Fox in those scenes.
I kind of do too.
Right?
Yeah.
Okay.
He's actually, like, engaging. Yeah.
Yeah, he somehow plays it well, but but what I really found interesting about it is that it doesn't seem to really line up along the man of science, man of faith dynamic that we, sort of come to know them as.
Yeah.
Because what I see from Locke here is Locke is being very cool-headed and rational and calculating, and, he is afraid of Ethan. He knows that Ethan is, in a one-on-one fight is going to, beat them all up because he's seen that. After Jack says he wants to go after Ethan, and Locke's line is, "I'm not a cold man, I feel for the loss of one of our own, but nothing fundamental has changed. We're on Ethan's turf, he has the advantage." That's after Scott gets killed. Where
Right.
Ethan, and Jack is...
Steve?
No, I mean Scott. Don't do
Sorry,
that.
should not joke about the dead.
It's a kids' TV show. But yeah, so I mean, Jack is like very emotional response to that. You see his sort of hot-headedness come in. He just wants to run into the jungle and find Ethan. So I find it interesting to see Locke being the sort of cold, calculating one versus Jack being the irrational,
the impulsive, emotional, live
Right.
together, die alone one.
which is not like exactly the opposite of man of science, man of faith, but it's a different way of thinking about those characters and what their different leadership qualities are. I thought.
That's very interesting. Yeah, so you make a very good point, I think. And man of science, man of faith is definitely the dichotomy with which I normally approach Jack and Locke. But there also is something to be said for Locke. I'm just going to posit something and then you can react to it.
Pause it away.
So Locke has this implicit trust of the island, right? And this implicit, you could call it faith, you could call it trust, whatever, that the island will sort of give and take away as it sees fit, and that will be right. And so I think Locke is a lot less worried about things like Scott dying, which, from sort of a human perspective, is careless and cold. But from Locke's sort of perspective of being in harmony with the island, he's just kind of doing the island's will, or letting the island do its will. Is that possible? Whereas Jack is resisting, quote unquote, what the island wants.
That's super interesting. I mean, I definitely wondered. I mean, the line I quoted a minute ago where Locke says, "I feel for the loss of one of our own."
Right.
I did wonder about that.
Yeah.
Like, you say you do, but how much do you feel for that loss?
Yeah.
Like, even after Boone dies, and I was just rewatching that episode, even though we're not there yet for one of the interviews we have coming up. But Locke goes through this whole, sort of public ritual of, I'm so sorry, I wish this hadn't happened, I shouldn't have sent him up into that plane, but it kind of seems the whole time like he doesn't actually have any regrets about it, or at least that's the way I was reading it.
I haven't watched that episode in a long time, but I agree with your assessment.
But that's interesting. I had not thought about that in terms of, does Locke just, figure if it happens, the island wanted it to happen, and therefore it's not, worth creating more trouble over.
Yeah, that's what I kind of think of when I think of Locke as a man of faith, per se. Like, he's very... His mission is sort of to do the island's will at this point. Mm-hmm. Or, like, uncover the secrets of the island. But if he can't, if he can't get the hatch to open, it's because the island doesn't want the hatch to open. It's not because he's failed.
Right.
And if if Boone dies, it's not because he's failed, it's because the island wanted Boone to die.
Right, the island is testing him.
And yeah, and if Ethan comes and takes one of their own, well, it's just leading us down this path to solving the mystery. Anyway, so that's actually what I was going to bring up in hindsight, is this emerging Jack Locke dynamic, which we've known was coming because that's, for both of us, I think one of our favorite parts of the show.
For sure.
But it really emerges here in, like, a palpable way that, like, Locke has one vision, Jack has another, and they are frequently going to be in conflict. And not like, you know, punchy, fighty conflict, but political conflict. And I look forward to seeing that unfold as we go.
I mean, we're building up to the famous man of science, man of faith conversation in the finale, which is one of the best scenes of the show.
Agreed.
I think.
Agreed.
I wonder who will think is the better leader at the end of it.
You know?
Because as you know...
I look forward to changing my mind.
Yeah? Well, what did you think the first time?
Well, actually, I don't really remember. Because I didn't particularly like Jack, but I was not nearly as sold on Locke as you are.
Yeah.
So, I don't know.
So, I was super sold on Locke the first time.
But you are much more skeptical of Locke this time around.
I am, just because of the way he seems to be manipulating people for, based on this faith in the island that, as we know now, is kind of unfounded. But this episode, I definitely found myself, thinking that Locke's strategy here was the right strategy. And the same a few episodes ago when they went after Ethan the first time, where Locke knew it was a bad idea, and they did it anyway, and it turned out badly. So I don't know, I definitely will be interesting to watch the build-up over the next 8 weeks or so.
Yeah.
I have some hindsight as well. It's unrelated to Jack and Locke. I thought that it would have been really interesting to see what happened if Charlie did not shoot Ethan, and if they actually captured him and took him prisoner.
Because Charlie says that at the very end. He says, "You really think you would have told us anything?"
Right.
Which I'm inclined to agree with, but what if this is a, Ben showing up in the balloon situation, or what if there is some story that he's supposed to give?
I'm sure there is a story that he's ready with, and what I was really wondering was, what do the others do if the survivors capture him? Because with Ben, they made every effort to get him back. They sent Michael in to break him out.
Right. But Ben was the leader. But Ethan was a leader, right? I mean, he was a man of skill.
He was, and he's clearly valuable. I mean, he was the doctor. He wasn't the doctor, but he was
a doctor.
He had some medical experience to help with the pregnancy issues. So I wonder, what lengths the others would or wouldn't have gone through, and what would that have caused. It could have been an interesting route.
Yeah. I think that pretty nicely segues us into our interview segment.
It does. We're talking about Ethan Rom.
Yeah, so let's tune back in. A couple weeks ago, if you were with us then, we played the first half of an interview that Sammy did with William Mapother. We talked about some of the crazy faces that Ethan made, how he got the role, things like that. We're going to play you the second half now.
And that interview ended, by the way, with William telling us that when he would come back to the show in later years, that sometimes he would be reading the script and it would be like a surprise introduction of Ethan. And
I think the phrase was, "Holy shit, it's Ethan Rom."
Holy fucking shit, it's Ethan Rom.
Excuse me, I omitted a word.
Very important word. So we're gonna talk about some of those holy fucking shit, it's Ethan Rom moments where he comes back, and you'll want to hear what he has to say.
Let's go.
Right, I was thinking, you talked about goosing up the tension of the, I think there's a scene in the 5th season when they're flashing through time, and Locke shows up at some unknown point in time on the island by the Beechcraft plane, and he falls, and then suddenly you just show up and you're pointing a gun at him, like, out of nowhere, and then he flashes away 10 seconds later, so I think that's probably the effect they were going for there.
Yeah, exactly right. That was when I was in the jungle, right?
Yeah.
I think I step out of the jungle. Yes, I honestly, I have very little recollection. Sometimes they would fly me over for literally a day's work, and they'd drop me in, and I would perform my holy shit moment, and then I would leave. And I don't remember a lot about that particular scene, other than the fact that it's something you see in an old movie. In which you only have one line, you have one thing to do, and the damn actor can't do it right. I think 2 or 3 times I came out, and I only have like 5 words, and I don't know what was going on with me that day, but I kept screwing up the words, to the point that I think it's in one of the blooper reels, like on maybe that season's ending DVD, the bonus features. They show me stepping out of the jungle and screwing up my lines time after time.
What did you enjoy working on the show? Because I imagine it. I mean, it sounds like it was probably a pretty different experience than just about anything else you ever worked on.
It was a very different experience, and I had a blast. The cast and crew were terrific. It was a very fun and interesting character. The setting and the show were fun, and it was also fun to be a part of a cultural phenomenon. Not only, everybody likes having someone come up and say, "Hey, I like your work," but aside from the attention, just knowing that I played some small part, as it were, in creating something that attracted people and generated thought and provoked conversation, that was a lot of fun. And you're shooting in Hawaii, which doesn't suck.
You made the comment earlier about that line that was that I think was cut from the episode where you confront Claire and Charlie. You said that you said to Claire, "Everything's going to be okay."
Something like that. I believe it was very close to that, and it was to suggest, "I am going to take you away, but you won't be hurt." That's how I read it.
And that's interesting because there's the episode in season 2, maternity leave, where you finally get the flashbacks from Claire of what happened after Ethan took her away, and I think it was definitely not what anyone expected, that they were, Ethan was taking care of her in this nursery and was very kind and seemed to care about her. But then later you find out that supposedly the plan was that at the very least Ethan was supposed to just take the baby and kill her afterwards. So I'm curious what you make of sort of Ethan's motivations and how he felt about Claire, and whether he actually cared about her in the end.
I think he absolutely did. I can't tell you how many conversations I had with fans in grocery stores or fan conventions or online. There was a very popular message board website in the early seasons, and I would go on and talk about what I understood about Ethan and things from his point of view. And because I had performed the character and watched the show through that point of view, through his point of view, I was aware of a lot of little elements that a lot of people weren't. For instance, a lot of people forget, and I think it's in season 3, maybe the middle of the season 3, episode, 6 or something, where Juliet has come to the survivors, and after Ethan has been shown in that hooded sweatshirt, likely injecting Claire, and what is sort of nefarious activities that guy up to, Juliet says no. Juliet, who has been welcomed and identified as a good guy and helping them, says, "No, Ethan was part of my group. He was supposed to have been doing that." Which,
You're right,
people,
I'd forgotten that.
Of course, people, and one of the strengths of the show that a lot of people identify is the conflicting sympathies it plays upon. We see Josh Holloway, I can't remember his character's name, who's so well liked by the audience, and we see him kill, I think, 2 people in cold blood. And I think we see Kate kill somebody. She burns, I believe it was her stepfather or somebody.
Yeah, she blows up his house.
Yeah, exactly. And so I was always fighting to give Ethan the same courtesy to suggest that he could be viewed in more than one ways. So in answer to your question, I did see Ethan as liking Claire and sympathizing with her, and certainly we see later that he was a surgeon. And I did not fully track all the different time shifts and the parallel lives and alternate lives of the characters. At a certain point, mentally, I moved into the backseat, and I enjoyed the show and I enjoyed the characters' backgrounds. I did not make an effort to untangle all the different possibilities. So it could be, given my very limited understanding of what they showed, that in one of his lives, Ethan was very happy to sacrifice Claire, and in another, he was not. So it's possible that these various elements I recall and that I'm identifying could line up according to the various alternate lives that he had led. I don't know. I hadn't thought about that before. This is the danger of this show. If you're not careful, you just ramble. You just ramble on and sound like a damn fool.
We've had that difficulty on occasion with the podcast, but hopefully not too much. Since you were a fan of the show, which I think is, which I didn't realize before we started talking, did you as a fan, did you have a favorite part or a favorite character?
So I'm going to separate out the character from the actors playing them. I did like the character of Saheed very much. I thought that was a very interesting character. And, of course, I haven't seen the show in so many years. There were 2 or 3 others whom I thought, God, I could really watch their lives a little bit more. And I would say that it's a show, it's unusual for me to be a fan of a show that I'm on because I, like a lot of actors, not all, but a lot of actors, hate watching myself. And so, fortunately, if I was on the show a lot more, ironically, I probably would not have been as much of a fan. And when I knew I was coming up, I would leave the room or turn my head or cover my ears or some silly thing. So I did enjoy Saheed's character and Jack's. It was a fun show.
One other question on that note: did you have what was your take on the finale? I have to ask that.
Fair enough. I guess like the finale itself, I was a bit ambivalent about it. On the one hand, I would have liked something a little bit more definitive, a little bit more clear, maybe something a little bit more emotionally satisfying. On the other hand, I recognize that given how many paths through the jungle they had taken, as it were, they had, in effect, I think, limited the number of ways they could conclude the show, and while still honoring what they had established. So, in other words, maybe it was the best of all possible options.
You know, we asked Jack Bender as well about the finale, and I just, his comment was, look, I know that everyone wanted or a lot of people wanted the sort of big, mega, sort of uber reveal that explains everything, but I think that you have a good point that they had sort of, I don't want to say backed themselves into a corner, but I don't know that it would have made any sense at the point that they were at to go that route. It definitely seemed to me as well like the the route with the sort of religious undertones and the mysterious energy and the afterlife. It for better or for worse, and I happen to be a fan of it, but it did kind of seem like that was the way they needed to go after what they had done in the last season, especially.
Yes, I think that's my take, and I will say that people can. And people do criticize the show for a variety of things, but one thing that I don't think they can be, the writers and the creators can be criticized for, is taking the storylines and the characters and what had come before lightly. I think they thought very seriously and honored their audience and the creation about what they had established and what was true and what was logical and consistent. Damon once said to me, in regard to all the different clues, whether it was the spine of a book on a bookcase or an errant comment by someone, every single thing in the show is there for a reason and is connected and can be explained and is intentional and makes sense.
So, I'm not an actor, but I feel like that's got to be exciting as an actor to hear that.
It's wonderful. It helps. It helps the actor feel and complete the alternate reality, because you're not Ethan Raume on an island. You're not Henry V on the battlefield, and so part of acting is constructing the alternate reality in your imagination, in your senses, and blocking out what's there. And every step in that direction that makes it easier for the actor is a help. And so knowing that all this, all the other characters, all the dialogue, all the set design is there and is of a piece and intentional and connected was a huge help.
William, what are you working on now?
A couple different things. I'm a writer, so I'm finishing a script, which I'm always very excited about. I just finished a couple episodes of MacGyver that aired a couple weeks ago. I've got 1 or 2 independent films in post-production. I'm waiting to hear back about a couple things. I also co-founded the online film finance platform called Slated, which brings together independent filmmakers and financiers around the world. So as opposed to Indiegogo and Kickstarter, in which people contribute to a project, but they're donating and get a hat or something in return, on Slated they actually get equity. So we've taken online what has always been offline. And then I've buried the lead because the most important thing I'm working on is that I have a newborn daughter, 12 weeks old today, and it's put everything else in shadow and everything else in perspective.
Well, whatever you do, my only advice there would be don't make that face at her that you made at Charlie and Claire.
You've been waiting the entire time to lay that line on me.
No, I just thought of it right now. I promise you, just thought of it.
It's a very good closing line, Sammy. I like that.
William, thanks very much for talking to us. Really appreciate the time.
Thank you.
You know, it's really, really cool to hear an actor like William talk about how big a fan of the show he is. Like, to talk about the directors and the writers with such respect. And also, he was in the forums. Like, he would just go on the forums and talk about his own character.
Yeah, no, and it's I feel like validating for us as fans of the show. Like, okay, he was in it, and he also loved it.
He also was really into it.
Yeah, that's pretty cool.
Yeah. It seems like that is it for this week's episode. As always, we would love it if you want to watch one of the remaining episodes in Season 1 and call and leave us your hot take. You can do so at 9546-DHARMA. You can also record yourself on your phone and just message it to our Facebook page.
We will be back next week with Outlaws, which is a Sawyer episode. I'm pretty sure it's the one where we get Christian Shepherd and Sawyer in the bar in Australia, which is a fabulous flashback.
So looking forward to watching that.
In the meantime, follow us on Twitter at The Hatch Podcast. We're on Facebook at facebook.com/The Hatch Podcast.
If you are so inclined, rate and review us on iTunes, Stitcher, wherever you get your podcasts. That helps other people find the show.
And we really love it when you say nice things about us.
We really do.
Join the show. Our cover art is by Danny Roth. Our theme music is by Andy G. Cohen.
It has been a pleasure. Namaste.